Bill, it looks like we have everyone on board and the meeting open. So,
Very good. Without further delay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the 990th meeting of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. I will read the ethics statement. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest or the appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please indicate. Please identify the conflict or the appearance of conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. Jay does not appear, there does not appear to be any conflicts, so we can move the consideration of the November 2021 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to the November 21 board meeting minutes?
and Mr. President, if you guys would like, you could take both the November and December minutes as a single motion.
Okay.
Choose.
Does anyone have any corrections or additions to the December 7, 2021 meeting minutes? I do not see any indication of such, so I would entertain a motion to approve both sets of minutes.
This is Wallace. I enter a motion to approve both sets of minutes.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Wallace and a second by Andy to approve both sets of minutes. Let's do a roll call for the record. Ashley? Ashley approves. Michelle?
Aye.
Michelle approves. Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
Motion's approved to approve those minutes. Mr. Campbell, I'm going to hand it over to you now for the license reinstatement application by Mr. Baskin.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Lauren Baskin, you'll see, has joined us. He's should see him there on your screen. He's waving at everyone. So let me give a brief background. Of course, you all have these background materials you received last week. But Lauren formerly held North Carolina license to practice number 22772, and he chose to let that go inactive, and it did on March 2nd, 2018. Dr. Baskin is not currently licensed in any other state. He was previously licensed in Florida and Indiana as well. Dr. Baskin, of course, will tell you about what he's been doing and what he plans to be doing. He had not practiced pharmacy since his license expired. I'll let him talk to you about what he's been doing in the interim and go through his request for you. But a reminder to all board members under Board Rule 160C states that the board shall require an applicant for licensure without examination, which a license to or application to reinstate is, who has not practiced pharmacy within 2 years prior to application to obtain additional continuing education, practical pharmacy experience, successful parts at the board's licensure exam, or a combination of the foregoing as the board deems necessary to ensure that the applicant can safely and properly practice pharmacy. As you all know, of course, you have a default policy that applies to these, and in pertinent part A, an applicant who has not practiced pharmacy for more than 2 but less than 5 years must obtain 500 hours of internship under the supervision of a North Carolina licensed pharmacist, obtain 15 hours of continuing education for each year of practice, as well as take and pass the North Carolina version of the MPJE. And that policy also specifically states that an applicant who experiences, and Dr. Baskin has, And Lauren, I checked. maybe
Jay, can I interrupt you for a minute? I'm very sorry, but you keep going in and out and your volume's not good, and I'm afraid somebody's going to miss something really important in your comments. Can you get with Antoine and see if you can get that corrected?
Yeah,
It may be, Andy, that non-speaking board members and staff should mute. That might be the issue.
I'm gonna. Y'all, is that? Okay.
Except now we're getting a major echo.
Can we mute the others? Okay, everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I apologize to all. Lauren, sorry, I've got to go back through and restate some of this. So I don't know where I sort of dropped out, but I'm going to assume I dropped out as a reminder of the board's default requirements for an applicant with, and Andy says that's where I dropped out. Default requirements for an applicant who's practiced has not practiced, I'm sorry, for more than 2 but less than 5 years. The default requirements are that applicant must obtain 500 hours of internship under the credit under the supervision of a North Carolina licensed pharmacist, obtain 15 hours of CE for each year out of practice. I will go ahead and state for the record, Lauren has done that. He has the requisite CE that he would need, as well as taken past the North Carolina version of the MPJE. The policy does specifically contemplate that an applicant who wishes to request a departure from the default baseline can ask the board for that departure, and Dr. Baskin has done that. And Dr. Baskin has asked the board to waive the requirement that he obtain 500 hours of internship under the supervision of a North Carolina licensed pharmacist. Again, he has not requested waiver of the CE requirement, which he's already met, nor has he requested a waiver from the requirement to take and pass the MPJ. So with that, then, I will turn it over, Lauren, to you to talk to the board about your request and the reasons for it and any questions that the board members may have about that. So take it away, Lauren.
Great. Thank you, Jay. I have, for the last roughly 20 years, practiced as a pharmacist related to formulary management and research and helping choose cost-effective medications, basically, sort of more of a policy kind of thing than a dispensing. And between when I moved to North Carolina and now, so that's 2011, until now, I've been doing exactly the same thing. I've been working with hospitals and formularies and doing research and choosing cost-effective medications. And in 2017, I let my license lapse because nobody was requiring that I be a pharmacist to do these things. And I wasn't working for a specific employer. And then recently, I received a job offer from UNC Health, and their policy is that every pharmacist employed in the system must be a licensed pharmacist. So I have set back the process to apply for the licensure. The reason I'm asking for a waiver is because since 2011 and earlier, and definitely since 2017, I have been doing exactly the same thing I will be doing after I get my licensure. I will not be dispensing. I will not be processing orders. I will be doing formulary work for the UNC hospital system. So my reason for requesting the waiver is that there's nothing that is going to happen in the next 500 hours that will be anything different than what I have done in the last 10 years, for example. So I'm asking the waiver for that based on my continued experience of doing that particular aspect of pharmacy. That's it.
Board member questions? I have one for you, Dr. Baskin.
Yeah.
So let's say the board decided, yes, you do need to continue with an internship. under the traditional model, interns are supervised by licensed pharmacists. In the role that you'd be in, who would be your preceptor?
I have 3 licensed pharmacists that are directly supervising me. A woman named Ashley Pappas, who's in charge of medication management. My immediate boss, Mary Haston Vest, who's in charge of the department, and another pharmacist who's presently acting as a coordinator while she's out on family leave. So I will be directly supervised by pharmacists who are doing similar things to what I do.
And there's no rule that says that even though you're serving in an internship, you'd have to be paid an intern salary, quote unquote.
That's my understanding, right?
Bill, I can speak to that. I'm getting it. Sorry, y'all.
From the cave.
Okay.
Jay,
Okay,
you're,
can y'all hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm doing my best here. I told Bill earlier, I'm so ready for the virus crap to be over, because despite what you may think, it's a hell of a lot easier for staff to have an in-person meeting than it is to do it like this. But with respect to your question, Bill, that is correct. Supervision under a licensed pharmacist for purposes of requiring experiential hours does not have a pay or no pay. Certainly, he would be free to obtain that experience while being employed by UNC Health.
Well, in my mind, the traditional internship would be for a young pharmacist to learn from a more experienced pharmacist. Dr. Baskin, in your opinion, would an internship serve any practical purpose whatsoever in your case?
In a traditional internship, nothing. I'm being hired because of my skills and experience that I have, where I will continue to do them. Without wanting to sound arrogant, there's nothing that I'm being hired for to learn a new job, other than maybe new computer system that I'm not familiar with. But my basic tasks are, I'm being hired because of what I know and what I will continue to do, not because of anything new they're going to teach me. UNC, as it turns out, is trying to expand the role of their clinician pharmacists to include more research and evaluations, and that's why I'm being brought in as a mentor and trainer.
Dr. Baskin, this is Ashley. I have a question for you. Have you approached this situation with UNC to see if they would waive that requirement specifically for you, considering the role that you're playing there?
I have, but the UNC non-traditional pharmacies, there's a number of them in the system, and their role is that they expect everybody to be licensed. I don't know, it's just policy or consistency, but there are at least 20 people I know as pharmacy who are not in a dispensing role, all of whom are licensed and are expected to be licensed. So they are not willing to waive that.
Okay, thank you for answering that.
Thank you.
I have a question, I guess for all the board members, as well as for Jay and Clint. I guess for Jay and Clint first. I mean, what precedent do we have? I know we've had a couple of these decisions since I've been serving, but do we have any precedent that we could go to, first of all? And second of all, I think, if we do grant the waiver, would that affect any? Would that cause harm or yes, have a cause a safe practice for the citizens of North Carolina? Would it hurt anybody if we did have the waiver?
Keith, it's Jay. It's hard to come up with specific precedent because historically the board does approach these requests in a very specific way. I guess a couple of things I would say is that I agree with Lauren that what he is being asked to do is no different than what he's been doing for 10 years without the need for a license. So I don't think that in his case, doing that job that there is any realistic risk to the public health and safety. The caution that I would put into place, although that could be dealt with in your action, is that just to remember, when we license someone to practice pharmacy, we do not license them to do a particular job in pharmacy. We license them to practice pharmacy in any context. So I guess what I would say, Keith, is you would need to think about a couple of things. Is one, in light of that a license is general in its applicability, that does raise the issue of whether training to ensure continued competency exists. The flip side is you certainly could grant the waiver keyed to Lauren's specific position at UNC Health and say that we could draft an order that says he's been given this waiver and that it is tied to his practice of pharmacy in the specific job that he has described.
Yeah, and I'd be willing to declare that should my circumstances change and I ever wish to practice in a dispensing role, that I would come back to the board and ask, acknowledge that waiver does not exist. So I have no intent of doing that. And at my age, I'm not prepared to go back and do that. So if you wanted that declaration of agreement, I'm certainly in accordance with that.
Yeah, and Keith, I remember a lot of situations where somebody was coming from, working at Glaxo or something to do a more traditional pharmacy role, and there was some decrease in the number of hours. I don't remember a situation where somebody was coming to do the exact same thing. But I have a question for Dr. Baskin, and I guess that's the flip side of the getting a license conditioned on doing one thing. Is it your understanding that UNC would not give you the offer if the board were to say, you have to do your 500 internship hours. We're gonna, as soon as that happens, you can be licensed. Go work at UNC, and after 500 hours, tell us, and we'll give you a license.
Theoretically, that's possible. The risk is they say, well, you're raising this new issue that we hadn't thought about, and now maybe we'll just sort of look for an applicant who is licensed. So,
well, I mean, wouldn't it be a lot easier to have asked the people giving you the job than to have a hearing with the state of North Carolina to ask you to do something different?
Yeah, it had the timing worked out that particular way, but when I applied for this hearing back 2 months ago. So the timing is such now that I've actually been hired, and under the condition that I get my license. That's the condition. And,
okay. So you didn't think to ask them at an appropriate time, and now you're stuck.
Oh no, I asked in the beginning. I asked for a waiver. I asked them if I could waive the license. I asked a few things, and they, UNC is a large organization. They said, here's our policy, and you want to work here, you'll comply with it. And so I said, okay, the worst downside of this thing is that I will have to get 500 additional hours, which is, not impossible, but that's not where I want to be heading. And then talking with Jay, he explained the options, and that I suggested I bring it to the board and explain my circumstances.
Okay. But I think what you just said is your downside was doing the 500 hours. So is it your understanding that if you had to do the 500 hours, they would not fire you, but would let you do the 500 hours and get licensed and keep doing the same thing?
Subject to the timing around here, it's I only have so many months to get it, and I haven't. It would be very close, but I could be able to do it. It makes it very close because I was hired 2 months ago, and if this was the same day we started, now if they said, oh, okay, the hearing was last November, you've started November, I wouldn't have probably applied at that time. But now it's getting a little later. I'm
sorry, did you start 2 months ago, or are you still waiting to start?
I have started.
When did you start?
I started with them November 28th.
Clint, let me sort of jump in here on this, because I certainly will represent that he's not seeking to game anything.
Oh, no.
Yes.
What I was
it's-
trying to get at is if they wanted to do a 500-hour requirement, one thing the board members could do is to say, well, you've been doing this for 2 months. You've already done 100 hours.
Correct. That's
effectively.
correct.
And in normal circumstances, we would waive some of the 500 hours. So maybe we can get you where you want to go by saying it's 300 hours and you got 100 hours credit or something like that.
Yeah, and Keith, we do have precedent for that. Since you had asked, we do have precedent where somebody has come before us requesting a waiver, but they have been doing qualifying pharmacy work, which I fully believe Dr. Baskin's work does qualify, and he is being supervised by a pharmacist or more than one pharmacist. He absolutely can. There would be no departure from any precedent to say that you don't have to start acquiring those. You're not at zero today. That any hours that you've acquired under the supervision of a pharmacist at UNC, since you started the position at the end of November, those could count. That would simply be a matter of going back and having the pharmacist who supervised sign an affidavit to that effect.
Well, for example, if you waived me down to 200, by the time this goes through, I could meet it.
Right.
Well, and that was kind of the reason for my, one of the reasons for my question. I mean, truthfully, I don't see any reason to deny this request personally. But I also don't want to, I don't want to lay the foundation for future requests that might, by allowing this, I don't want to set a precedent we may not want to follow later on. My reasoning behind it.
Well, I personally see no practical reason to not grant this request. I don't see any practical benefit of requiring these additional hoops, whether it sets precedent or not. I just don't think in this case an internship's necessary. After having pondered this request since we got the information.
I agree with Bill. The only thing, and I don't want to get into trying to create a bunch of hypotheticals or anything like that. But, if say that just for an example, if the COVID things keeps going crazy and, the fact that we approved this, which is, this may not be germane to anything, and they need somebody to fill shifts because they've got some big hole with numbers of people that are out, in some kind of a situation, like that. And, whether that we're doing anything by sort of, I don't want to say, I mean, we're trying to be consistent with our rule that as we've applied it in the past, and we intend to apply it in the future. UNC Health is doing the same thing. I think they're trying to be consistent, that they've applied the same requirement to anybody else they've hired, and they need to continue to do that and avoid to make exceptions. And then, he's caught right in the middle. And but I don't have any problem with giving variance, but I just wonder about whether UNC hospitals would put him in a situation at some point, just given staffing or given whatever.
The
some
internship requirement would delay the licensure, Wallace, so that would actually prevent him from being able to staff on an emergent basis if that ever came to light.
Yeah, UNC has lots more dispensing pharmacists and access to them than having to turn to me. And I'm not even comfortable going back into a dispensing role, so I would decline that opportunity if they presented it. If I was going to be going dispensing in any way or any shape, I would be happy to get 500 hours in the pharmacy, because I'm not ready to do that and I'm not prepared to do that. So, but I appreciate your concern.
Yeah, members, again, one possibility would be, in light of that, in light of Dr. Baskin's role and his intended role is, again, you certainly could make a motion to approve whatever you want, obviously, but one possibility is you could make a motion to approve his waiver, but that waiver is approved solely for Dr. Baskin to practice in the role that he is currently practicing in. And if that were to change, it would be his responsibility to come back to us and say that role is changing and we could reconsider. Or like Clint said, another option would be that you could issue an order that based on his very specific job duties and his experience that he's already garnered since the end of April, you could also make a motion to say that you approve that you modify the reinstatement requirement to, for example, acquire 100 hours of practical experience. And Dr. Baskin could provide the paperwork very shortly to show that he's acquired that experience since the end of April. I mean, the end of November.
Jay, Bill, I'm sorry, I would make a motion that we do approve the language for the second option that Jay proposed or floated, that, we allow him to get credit for time served.
Yeah.
And that we approve it, and also and you could also, another condition is just say that if anything were to change, then he would notify the pharmacy board, because I don't, for any change in that or whatever, I don't have a problem with approving this. I really don't.
One point of clarification is I do think that if let me try to restate the motion, Wallace. The motion would be to approve Dr. Baskin's request for a waiver. The terms are as follows: that Dr. Baskin is given credit for the experiential hours that he has acquired under the supervision of pharmacists at UNC Health in his role since the end of November. And that's it. You can just state it that way. And we wouldn't even need, I don't think in that situation, we even need to get an affidavit or anything else. You're accepting his testimony that he's been practicing under the supervision of a North Carolina licensed pharmacist since the end of November. And you could, time served essentially, Wallace, but that would be the motion.
I'm good with that. I make that motion.
Michelle, did you have a question?
We are including, though, if it were to change, that he would call. I understand he doesn't want to practice do anything else and go into a dispensary role, but would that still be included with this motion or no?
I'm sorry, I left that out, Michelle. Yes, I heard that in Wallace's motion as well. I'm sorry.
Then I'll second that if that's all put together.
Yep, that's.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Jay, by way of clarification, would that let us know if they want you to dispense? That wouldn't be a permanent condition. That would end at the end of, let's just say 400 hours is 10 weeks is 2.5 is April 30th.
Yeah, Clint, thanks. I was going to raise that very point. Wallace, whether you would consider this a friendly amendment to your motion, which would be that the requirement of notification will end come April 30th, 2022, because by that time, he will have acquired more than 500 hours of supervised practice experience.
Excuse me, but I thought the motion was to consider time served as being sufficient for this internship. Did I mishear that?
Let me try again. So I think what the motion is that to approve his waiver and approve Dr. Baskin's request for waiver, he shall be allowed to be licensed as a pharmacist, based on his completion of the hours that he has already practiced at UNC Health under the supervision of pharmacists since the end of November. He still has to take and pass the MPJE, which he knows, and that's a different thing. If his role changes at UNC, or if Dr. Baskin contemplates any different position practicing pharmacy, from now until April 30th, 2022, he will need to notify the Board of Pharmacy, and we can consider whether he needs to get some different experience. But that will expire April 30th, 2022, because he will by that time have obtained the number of experiential hours he would need to reinstate his license.
Thank you. That
Yep.
clears up my confusion with the April thing.
Yep.
Any other discussion before we vote? All in favor of the motion, please indicate. Ashley,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Wallace.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Baskin.
Lauren, just procedurally, what I will do right after this meeting today is I will send you a letter documenting this. And I will, of course, copy Missy Betts, who is the Director of Licensing, so that she can issue you an authorization to test to take the MPJE on that.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you going to this effort for me.
Thank you, Warren. Thanks for the for sending all the good documentation and being here today. It was nice to meet you. Hopefully we'll get to meet actually face to face sometime in the post-Omicron world.
I know what you mean. I have to go do my time served now. So.
All right, very good. That's
all right. Thanks very much, guys.
Warren. Thanks very much.
Mr.
Jake,
you wanna
can
take
we
over?
refrain from saying post Omicron in the future, because it harkened to post-apocalyptic,
Yeah.
and let's not do that.
If we go full on post-apocalyptic, nobody's going to be checking licenses for anything. That's for sure. So members, next item on the agenda, we have a request to reschedule the March 2022, easy for me to say, Board of Pharmacy meeting. And Dr. Vance has requested that. As it turns out, our normal board meeting day falls right in the middle of his boys' spring break. And Dr. Vance, rather understandably, would like to be able to take his boys and do something on spring break. So Dr. Vance has indicated he'd be fine moving the meeting up a week to March 8th or back a week to March 22nd. I would suggest March 8th, but I'm staff-wise, we can do it either time. And so I'll leave it to y'all to tell us what you want to do on that.
I would prefer the 8th also, Jay. I've got a conflict on the 22nd, so.
The 8th is good for me, assuming that we get an invitation to wherever spring break is being held. Where are you going, Keith?
We are actually going to Phoenix.
Okay.
We'll pass then.
Going to go see some
Yeah,
spring
we're all
training
waiting to
games.
see if Keith has taken his young boys to Senior Frogs in Cancun, Mexico, but it sounds like that's not going to happen.
We catch some spring training.
That's awesome.
I'm good with March the 8th as well, Phil.
Sounds good. So be it.
All right, we'll just, by consensus of the board, the March board meeting will be moved to March 8th, 2022. And Kristen and I will make sure we get that posted in all the places that it needs to be posted. So thank you.
Shall be in person on that day.
From your lips to God's ear, Bill.
Thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Easy peasy.
All right, let me see if the estimable JP Brown is online to deliver our monthly financial update.
Yeah, I'm here. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, loud and clear. December financials look good. At the end of November, if you'll remember, a little bit under a lot of the revenues for renewals. That all seems to have just been a timing issue. So at the end of December, we actually saw a lot of the renewals jump way up, and then some categories actually already surpassed their annual projection, meaning that individuals have until the end of February, and entities have till the end of March. Anyhow, we've surpassed a lot of our annual forecast in some areas already. And then obviously with the limited operating activities due to the variant surge, once again, we've seen a continued sort of lower than expected operating expense overall. And that's sort of makes for a favorable variance, big picture wise. So more revenues than expected, less expenses than expected. Everything is good to go. You guys have the details in the financial reports as usual. I'm always happy to dive into the weeds, but overall, everything is where it should be. A little better than expected. There's no questions. I think I'll turn it back to Jay to go over the next point.
Any questions for JP? Anything on the monthly financial report? All right, seeing none, just a quick update, the Budget and Finance Committee, and remember the members of Budget and Finance are Ashley, Wallace, and Michelle. The Budget and Finance Committee has met twice since we convened in November. And two reasons for those. One is just to get a market conditions and forecast from RBC and First Citizens Bank. Those are the two firms that hold our reserve accounts. And the other thing the Budget and Finance Committee did was review our investment policy, a copy of which you've all received, and I know you're all familiar with that investment policy. Just by a quick reminder, our investment policy adopts the North Carolina general statute that directs what are permissible investments for the state treasurer to place monies that are not needed to meet current obligations. That's obviously an extremely conservative mix of investment opportunities. And so the board heard presentations from RBC and First Citizens Bank about the things they could do with our reserve accounts if we altered our investment policies to allow certain investments in equities and in investment grade corporate bonds. And the Budget and Finance Committee met again last week to further talk about that. And as we sit here today, the Budget and Finance Committee recommends change to investment policy. The committee is continuing to look at some other possibilities, but the investment committee was doing good due diligence about making sure that any change in our investment policy principally would avoid any possible appearances of conflict if we had any investments that could be plausibly traced in any way to entities that we regulate. And so the committee determined that needs a little bit more investigation, and we've asked RBC and First Citizens to come back with some suggestions on that. So where we sit is the committee recommends holding pat with our current investment policy, but the committee is going to continue looking at this particular issue. And Ashley, Michelle, and Wallace, if I misstated that any way or left anything out, do let me know on that. And let me say, I really, really appreciate the investment committee has been very diligent and thoughtful going through this. So thank you for that time. And so, Bill, there won't be a need for a motion of any sort here because there's not going to be any change unless somebody wants to make a motion, change the investment policy. And I'm not hearing any. So that's the report. And further updates as events warrant on that one. All right. No further questions. Missy, I think you're next up to give us an update on renewal season.
Yep. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All righty. So I attached a graph of renewals, and everything is really going really well. Everything is on par from years past, which is exactly what we're looking for. As you can see, 16,592 pharmacists have renewed, but do keep in mind these numbers are 5 days old. So, renewals continue to come in over the weekend and during the days. So I'm sure that number has increased right now, but that's 91% of pharmacists. Made some highlights here. 99% of pharmacies have renewed, which is very typical and expected. And 89% of DMEs have renewed. I've just from a staff perspective, I've noticed a decrease in the calls and emails concerning the forgotten login information. So I'm hopeful that the tools that we've put in place are the reason for that. And mostly pharmacists are calling me about CE and what CE is acceptable and whether live or correspondence, but nothing that's out of the ordinary. So I'd say all in all, everything looks great. But if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And the renewal deadline is January 31st, is that right?
Well, no, the December 31st is the actual deadline, but then we move into the grace period during the months of January and February. And so if they're not renewed by March 1, then their license will move to inactive for people on March 2. And then the pharmacies and DMEs have 1 more month as a late renewal. And if they are not renewed by April 1, then they will move to closed on April 2.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of very thoughtful work has gone into the renewal period this season by Missy and her team and Antoine as well. I think Missy is right that the lessons we learned last year about how to maybe more effectively manage lost passwords or login information, I think that absolutely has worked exceptionally well. So Missy, thank you and team for
Yep.
working through
Big
that.
thanks to Antoine, of course. IT is a huge part of renewals. So, and ThoughtSpan, they do a great job helping us add in the extra things that we need for renewal to make it go smoothly. So it's a team effort for sure.
Very good. Thanks, Missy.
Thank you.
And there is just a list, as we put in the minutes every year, a list of pharmacists who were licensed by examination over the previous calendar year. And so that will be going into the minute book. I presume nobody would be interested in having Missy read that into the record.
Least of all me.
But congratulations to all who achieved licensure by examination in 2021. Missy, do you want me to quickly mention, as you all know, each year we honor pharmacists who have been licensed for 60 years continuously, and we had originally planned to do that at this meeting, but we made a staff side decision that it would be a lot more meaningful if we could do that when we're able to have a live meeting again. So we're holding off on that with hopes that in March we'll be in a position to do that. Of course, some folks may not be able to come, but we do think it's important for that presentation that folks who can and want to come be able to do that. So we're going to keep that in our pocket until we're able to properly recognize those folks.
Yep.
Thank you, Missy Betts.
Thank you.
Kristen, it's all you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Kristen.
You can
So,
see Kristen is broadcasting from her corner office in some downtown location.
oh, my new dude. So as of this morning, we have 1,604 votes. Kind of got curious to see where we were last year, and needless to say, the last couple of elections we were we had a lot more votes than we do now. So I don't really know what to say about the low turnout. We're doing everything we can. We're sending reminders, we're tweeting. I think at this point there's not a lot we can do to increase voter turnout, but we're doing our best. So 1,604 votes as of today, which is just over 12% of eligible voters. So everything's running smoothly, no irregularities. We keep monitoring it daily, but everything is going smoothly with about 6 weeks left to vote. So I think, unless you all have questions, I think the thing we need to discuss today is the date that we are going to get together to tally the votes and announce that, which we usually do on March 2nd. I know Jay teaches that day.
Yeah, so and so does Ellen. We're trying to eliminate young minds, but so board members, yes, traditionally we meet on March 2nd. The electronic voting ends on March 1st. That gives a roughly 24-hour period for Kristen and Antoine to work through and tally, make sure the vote tally is right and there have been no technical issues. 24 hours has always been plenty of time to do that. My suggestion, members, would be that we convene by phone, or I'm sorry, or by Teams or whatever your preferred telecommunications device is, that we convene on March 2nd. Ellen and I will be teaching from 9 a.m. to noon, but I don't see any reason why we could not convene at, say, 2 p.m. on Thursday, March 2nd, to review the results of the election, to hopefully and expectantly certify those, and then also determine at that point, sort of lay down if there's a need to have a runoff in either election, to sort of describe what that process would be. So that would be my suggestion on that.
I'd prefer it to be done as soon as possible after the results are available, as opposed to waiting till the meeting date of March 8th. So thank you for considering that.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just caveat, I've actually taken my granddaughter to see Mickey and Minnie during that day, but I should be able to call in anyway. So, but I'll see if I can get.
I expect it would be a short meeting.
I understand. I understand completely, Jay. It shouldn't be a problem. I'll try to arrange. Maybe Mickey will stand in to observe the process.
Well, y'all think perhaps what we can do is, do you want, let's set it with a sort of firmish tentative March 2nd at 2 p.m. And then Wallace, maybe if between now and then you look at what y'all's itinerary is, and if you decide, well, we should be off of Mr. Toad's wild ride by some later point, we could move the time around a little bit. I just thrown 2 p.m. out there, but shall we set a tentative at 2 p.m. and then Wallace, if we need to move that back a little bit as we get closer, we can do it.
That'll be fine. I'll just stay away from Darth Vader, you know.
He has a way of finding you, my friend. I'm looking around, looking at all the cameras. Does that look good for everybody?
Looks fine to me. That's a great idea.
Okay, perfect. Well, thus it shall be done. Well, it's all kidding aside, that sounds great. I am dying to go to Galaxy's Edge down at Disney World. So we look forward to you getting on with your brand new lightsaber and your Jedi robes.
Okay.
Next up, Crystal Stefanik has our investigative report and an introduction.
Good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
As you guys know, Summer Canoy left the board in October, and we have hired a new investigator. We've had a little bit of switching around. So Joshua White moved over to District 4, which was Summer's, the vacant spot for Summer's the inspector role, and we have hired an inspector for the District 3 area, which is the Central District, and his name is Ruben Junez. He comes to us as a DEA contractor, and he has really hit the ground running. He's in the middle of doing some very, very interesting compounding modules online right now because we have kind of paused our field operations and slowly starting that back up this week. So he has been kind of buried in wonderful compounding modules. I'm sure he's ready to strangle me with all that information, but he is doing great and is very excited to be here. So
Is that the critical point training, Crystal?
it's well, we do both. We do critical point and USP on demand webinars. We've got access to the USP classes as well because those are the most current ones teaching the current enforceable USP chapters.
And I know Ruben is online because I see him. Ruben, not to put you on the spot, but that's precisely what I'm going to do. If you want to unmute and turn your camera on maybe for a second, everybody can at least get a look at you and hear you say hi.
Hello, everyone. Nope. Sorry, it's a little too loud there. There you go. Well,
Ruben, tell
hope
us
everyone
a
had a
little bit
great
about your
weekend.
background besides DEA work, whatever that was.
So I was a contract analyst with the DEA. I was basically an intelligence analyst, gathered a bunch of information, compiled it, gave presentations, or passed information along to the people that needed it. Essentially, what I like to tell everyone, the summary of my job is, I found people that didn't want to be found. Other than that, I was a Spanish analytical linguist for a few years as well. Translated a bunch of different types of media, be it sound recordings, just transcripts, any sort of documents that you had from Spanish to English or English to Spanish. Other than that, just kind of, I've honestly been doing that since I graduated college. That's kind of all I've been doing is contract work with the DEA.
Bueno.
Oh, see, a little bit of Spanish right there.
Very little. Ruben,
well, someone's going to Senior
aboard.
Frogs, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Welcome aboard, Ruben, certainly from all of us, and really do appreciate too coming on board at an awkward time where, because of Omicron, we're having to adjust a lot of procedures, but great to have you on board, and look forward to seeing you in person as well.
Thank you.
Crystal, anything else on the report?
So as you can see under the tabs, the investigative report tabs, this is the year end for 2021, January 1st through December 31st. We assigned 431 cases. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
We had 431 cases we worked, which is on average a little higher than I think we've had in the last couple of years. Actually a lot higher, as Ellen is kind of nodding. Usually we run around 400. I think the highest we've had in the last couple of years was 420. So this was, very high considering the last couple of years. We, as you can see the breakdown under your tabs, there was 100 procedural legal cases, 13 substance abuse, 84 AOC charges, which is those background charge cases we work. We did 14 application charges, and these are cases we investigated when the applicant reports a charge on their pharmacist technician application. 21 diversion cases, 103 error and omission cases, 5 incident reports, 91 inspection follow-up cases. So large amount of cases we worked this year under some crazy circumstances, as you guys all know. We had a total of 20 voluntary surrenders, 1 DME, 4 pharmacists, and 15 pharmacy technicians. And as I had mentioned earlier, we kind of had a pause from right before Christmas through fairly probably to the end of this month. We are getting slowly back out in the field for those who are comfortable this week and next week. But we had to pause trying to see, basically ride that wave of Omicron, see what kind of that's going to look like going forward. But yeah, we have a few that are getting back slowly out into the field ordered some supplies. Ashley's just sent me an email while I was talking about some more supplies that she's getting for us. So for PPE and sanitizing wipes. So we're getting all that stuff and sending that out to the field as well. And as Bill mentioned earlier, we were talking before the board meeting, just as a heads up, since we talked about this in November at our retreat, USP did extend their public comment session through March 17th, so an additional 45 days. So that will still be open until March 17th for any public comments on the proposed chapters of 797 and 795. That's all I got. If you got questions for me, I'm free to answer them.
Thank you, Crystal.
Crystal, can you speak to how many inspections were done in 21?
I don't have those stats.
Okay. All right.
Oh.
It was significantly less. I think it was the 500 range, and normally we are closer to doing 1,000 inspections
Correct.
a year.
Correct.
And so, it is all the ground halt that our folks are dealing with that has led to the profound decrease in the number of facilities we were able to get into safely and inspect this year. So, So just wanted
we
to
were,
round out the
absolutely.
picture.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. We did do less inspections this year, but we were shut down the first part of the year. Didn't really get back out full blown until probably April of this year. So our people hit the ground trying to get as many as they could, and then we did another ground halt in December just because of Omicron coming back up. And then we did slow inspections during the Delta wave because we didn't want to go and overload hospitals that were already overloaded when Delta was coming through. So so hopefully, fingers crossed, if we can get back out and get full blown like we are accustomed to, we can get back up to those numbers to 800 to 1,000 inspections going forward.
And members, I would like to compliment the inspections and investigation staff is that the one thing that while the inspections numbers are down unavoidably, they've constantly used risk-based assessments to determine which places are we going to go back into, recognizing that just your absolute run-of-the-mill inspections of pharmacies that have no disciplinary history or prior inspection issues with us. Obviously, we moved those to a lower priority and tried to focus our efforts specifically on higher risk type practices or practices that may have had prior inspection problems. So I appreciate it's always been a moving target to try to cover as much as we can consistent with public safety. And I appreciate Ellen and Crystal constantly reevaluating that and adjusting accordingly.
Mr. Campbell, before we get into the rulemaking section, I would like for us to take about a 10-minute break.
I think this is the perfect time, Mr. President, to do that. So shall we pause and reconvene here at 11:10?
11:10 it is.
Very good.
Antoine, are you there?
Hang on, Michelle. He's coming over here to my, he can use my.
What you got, Michelle?
I know, look, here I come again. So I tried to put that picture on my little thingy and it's not showing up.
You see my background?
Yeah, you know how you see like Ashley left as AD? I tried to put my board of pharmacy picture there and it like Crystal has a picture and you have a picture.
Oh, gotcha. I'll show you how to
It's
do
there,
that.
Michelle. It's there. When you go off camera, the picture's there.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I saw
Okay,
it earlier.
Okay, it just shows me MC on my side. Thank you, love.
You're welcome. I saw it when you went off camera earlier. I was like, oh, that's a pretty picture. So I did see that.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Oh God. Okay. Thanks so much.
All right.
Clint, I'm trying to keep myself in bubble wrap here. I got to take Curran back to Syracuse this weekend, and Kaylin had an exposure over the weekend, so she's not allowed in the house.
Well, my wife had an exposure going to her 6 a.m. Exercise class last week, which I know is a way that I will not die. But I told her, woman, you're in a high school every day. I'm sure you're exposed 10 times a day. I'm not really concerned.
Yeah, we just, the challenge for us is if either of the kids get it, they're vaxxed, they're boosted, the odds are very low with any problem. But the problem for us is if Curran gets back to Q's and he tests positive, then he has to quarantine at Q's.
Yeah.
And that's not a great way to start the semester. So
there are lots of things to do in January in Syracuse if you're not going to classes.
Right. Absolutely. It looks like everybody's coming back on. Clint, have you seen Ted Lasso?
No, but when I just got a new phone, I got a year subscription to Apple Plus, so I guess I'll start watching it.
Well, Ellen made sure as part of my Christmas gift that I had a means of getting 3 months of Apple TV, which I'm sure is going to lead to me re-upping for many more months of Apple TV. But I'm watching.
Give up your credit card number.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he was like, I don't want to pay the $5 a month. I was like, dude, it is so worth it. So I got him a $25 gift card.
So, Clint, you would like Ted Lasso.
My plan before this was to wait until they canceled it and then just binge watch them all and pay for 1 month.
Well, that's what you can do. But Jay is being very measured and restrained.
Yeah, I'm saving the episodes.
Yeah, I watched all 2 seasons, I think, in 3 days. But and we got Ashley addicted.
My favorite show ever.
Well, I'll start watching right now. Y'all won't even know.
It is a remarkably great show for our times, and that it is funny, it is sweet and uplifting without being cloying. It's really good. I'm sure all the people who are logged in are super interested in my review of Ted Lasso, but
no spoilers. He's only on episode 7.
If you've seen it.
Bill, I think we just need to see Wallace and Andy come back on here, and we'll be good to go. Oh, there you go.
Still trying
Andy,
to
are you in Virginia? Is that an actual scene from your parents' farm?
Thank you for asking. That was the 8 inches we got in Franklin County, Virginia, the last couple days. I left there yesterday morning and drove back. It was beautiful. We literally went up there to get snowed in with Papa and Grandma. We did that last year. We did it again this year. Just in case we don't see the white stuff down here, we've gotten our fill of it.
Bill, looks like we got everybody back. So
Yes,
ready
sir.
to proceed if you are.
Please do. Thank you.
So, members, we have a fairly substantial sort of rulemaking docket today to go through. Let me start first, and Clint's going to pick up with this. But as you all know, you are at your November meeting, which was the retreat, you approved the repeal of 21 NCAC 4.1417. That's our existing remote medication order entry rule, which applies only to health system pharmacy practice context. And you voted to adopt amended Rule 46.1816, which became the combined centralized pharmacy services rule to incorporate central fill operations, which of course has been allowed under North Carolina law for quite some time. And second, for the first time, to authorize, outside the context of a waiver, remote medication order entry practices for all types of pharmacy practice. And just to recap briefly, as you know, we had a public hearing on that rule in July, and in response to the substantial comments that were received on the rule, the Telepharmacy Committee met several times to go through each of those comments, and the committee produced a detailed and thoughtful set of recommended responses, which at the November meeting you guys reviewed and adopted as a full board. Recall that at the November meeting, we also discussed whether or not the changes to the rule that came in response to the comments required, as a matter of law, republication of the rule. Each of the proposed changes eliminated requirements in the rule that commenters had found problematic, or replaced them with requested changes to make the rule easier to comply with and easier to administer. As a result of that, Mr. Pinion obtained a staff counsel opinion at the Rules Review Commission that the rule did not require republication because each of the changes were made in response to commenters, favorable to the commenters, and were made within the contours of the things that the rule had proposed. So the board voted to approve that and move forward, and the rule was docketed at the Rules Review Commission for hearing in December. On the day before that hearing at the Rules Review Commission, CVS filed a request to address the RRC to argue, among other things, that the rule as approved should have been subjected to a second round of notice and comment. In light of that comment to the RRC, board staff asked the RRC to remove the rule from the docket so that we could discuss with y'all what that objection was, and whether or not you want to, as you can, publish the rule for another round of notice and comment. And so, Clint, hopefully I got the basic background right, and I will yield to you.
You did. And before, as you recall, in November, you did decide to go ahead and send up the rule with changes to the RRC based upon the RRC staff council opinion that it did not require republication. Not every change to a rule requires republication. It basically has to affect somebody who wouldn't have known they would have been affected, deal with a completely different subject matter, or have some effect that is not anticipated. And in this case, the principal substantive change was to change from a requirement of licensure of all people doing Rmoe to use of NABP Verify, which is an alternate and less restrictive and less costly way of ensuring folks don't have discipline than the proposed licensure effect. CVS sent a letter that I would describe as in good faith, but lacking a thorough understanding of North Carolina's very idiosyncratic APA, and focused on that. And I want to address the other things that they focused on that I think are not worthy of discussion. Their argument was that republication was required because NABP Verify did not exist at the time, and therefore they were not really in a position to say whether NABP Verify was something that they approved or did not approve of being in the rules when they submitted their comments. After they submitted that rule, I had another discussion with the RRC council, who thought that their objections were not well-founded in the APA. But it occurred to us that whether legally required or not legally required, it was worthy of this board's further discussion. Whether in terms of letting people have their say, you are better off when, given that NABP Verify is coming online in a couple of weeks, going ahead, republishing and letting people have a look at that as an alternate to licensing and comment on that in terms of whether that should be part of the rule. That seems like something y'all could decide to do. And so we asked RRC, notwithstanding their views on this, to hold off this last month on approving the rule and give us a chance to have that discussion with y'all. So the options are, say, forget it, it's not substantial. RRC Council says it's not substantial. We're going to roll back in there in 2 days and ask them to rule on it, or go ahead and republish, which would take several months, as y'all know from the usual process, but it's not quite as critical given the waiver on Rmoe that has been in existence during COVID. Jay, you're muted.
That is the backdrop, everyone, on this. We can go in either direction you care to go. I will say that in terms of timing, remember that the telepharmacy committee's very hard work and diligent work on this has been a desire that at such time as the COVID public health emergency lifts, whenever that may be, we didn't want to have a situation where folks had operated Rmoe practices under a waiver and the waivers went away and folks had to sort of undo everything that they had done. The pharmacy committee's goal has been to have a permanent rule in place so that there would be a seamless transition for that. From that standpoint, I think my personal opinion is there is little to no likelihood that the COVID public health emergency will be lifted over the time frame that it would require to go publish a second round of notice and comment. So I don't think that goal would be jeopardized by doing this. The other thing I'll point out is recall that in November, sorry, I had my eyes itching. Recall that in November, you also voted to publish for notice and comment another Rmoe rule, which I'm calling the Intra pharmacy Rmoe rule. That's a pharmacy in North Carolina using its own employees to perform remote functions. That's going through now. So if you republish the inter-pharmacy Rmoe for comment, it doesn't exactly line them up, but arguably gets us to a point where everything might land at roughly the same time. So staff doesn't have any concern if you republish that we're jeopardizing what folks have invested in. And as Clint pointed out, there is a fulsome description of everything that the NABP Verify will be on NABP's website. And so anybody that wants to make a comment about NABP Verify has the information they need to be able to do that.
And Jay, to that point, if you were to republish today, and it would be republishing the rule with the technical changes that the RRC Council had us make that were all sort of typographical. It could be effective by June the 1st. So it seems likely that we will still be in the throes of COVID on June the 1st. And the comment period would run through at least mid-April, so everybody will know what NABP Verify is during that time period. And I guess the third thing I would say is you can make the in-house RMOE and the off-premises RMOE rules line up, notwithstanding that they're slightly differently situated procedurally right now. We can make that sync up.
Y'all, I know that's a lot of procedural argle-bargle, to use a Supreme Court justice's favorite term, but happy to help unpack any of this for you.
Well, it sounds to me like there's no real downside to republishing it, and there could be some upside.
I don't know.
Additional information. But, sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, you're fine, Bill. It's hard when we're virtual. I am not in favor of giving CVS another opportunity. I think they've had their opportunity to make notice and comment, as Jay has pointed out, and so has Clint. We've spent hours and hours and hours working on this as a committee. I think we've put together what is a very reasonable decision and real proposal. And I don't want to see any further delay for something that Clint describes as unnecessary and not in good footing, for lack of a better term, with the law from a perspective of their argument. So I'm ready to move forward. That's my humble opinion.
What happens if we do move forward? What's the downside to that? Make sure I understand that correctly.
Well, the downside to that, I guess, are a couple things. Although delaying doesn't necessarily resolve them. A majority of the commission could disagree with RRC counsel and say you should have republished it, and now you need to republish it, and now you're further down the road along that timeline. The second downside is anybody who submits 10 objections can delay implementation of a rule, and so there is some benefit. And they don't have to be right. They don't have to make sense. As long as 10 people send a letter, it gets held up. And so there is some benefit in making sure that everybody feels like they've at least had their chance to say their piece.
If it is held up and you still publish a ultimate rule, and anybody wants to come back and make a big deal out of that and try to argue maybe some of this process was not good, or not, I mean, they want to bring up a whole nother argument. Does republishing versus not republishing put us in any better position, Clint, given you're the one that would have to represent it if it was challenged after the fact? We went ahead and published, went ahead and moved forward, and somebody still, wanted to come up and challenge it, which could happen anyway, I understand, but does the fact that we republish put us, in your opinion, in an action, put us in any better position, having made the extra effort to republish? Does that make sense?
That's a good question. I think that's the key question, Wallace, and I think it does put us in a better position, because a lot of the arguments that the objection made, I think any rule review commissioner would view as being not well-founded under North Carolina's APA. This one I think you have to understand licensure, you have to understand NABP verify, and so there's a chance that a commissioner could say, well, I think, I'm going to err on the side of caution and say that needed to be republished. Obviously, if you republish it now and then adopt the exact rule that you published, nobody could conceivably argue that on that grounds against the rule.
So members, what's your pleasure?
Andy, I appreciate what you're saying about wanting to get it done. I hear the other side too. Somebody want to make a motion?
I feel like that if republishing would make it, I hate to use the word airtight, but it would give us more footing. If we did have an issue down the road based on what Clint said, am I accurate in that statement, Clint?
Yeah, I mean, nobody can say, well, we don't know what NABP verify is. And you've sort of hornswoggled us into that after the notice and comment. So it does, yes, put us in a much better position. I'm not worried about anything else they had to say.
Okay. I think in light of that, Andy, I'm with you on, wanting to go ahead and get it done. But I think, it's not going to prevent services from being provided in the interim. So I say, let's just go ahead and republish it. I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Without a second, the motion will die.
I'll second that motion.
Well, if we just just sit on it till it's published, I mean not published, but sit on it till all the information's out about the NABP program. It basically leaves in effect everything that's in effect now, right? I mean, it just continues on having to have a license in North Carolina to do any of this stuff.
No, let me reset that, Wallace. So where we sit right now is, as you all know, the only state law authorization for remote medication order entry practices is for health system practices. That's existing rule 1417. This rule would expand that, obviously, to all types of pharmacy practices. In the interim, though, the board did execute its emergency services waiver at the beginning of the COVID crisis. I think this was the expanded emergency services waiver from April of 2020, which does allow remote medication order entry functions during the COVID crisis. So where we sit, Wallace, is that if nothing happened, then the ability to do RMOE outside of a hospital context would only last as long as the waiver was in place. And the board the board only has authority to issue waivers during the time of the declared emergency. But I'll also point out that the board is not under an obligation to maintain a waiver for the entirety of a public health crisis. And in fact, as y'all recall, at the end of December 2020, we lifted the waiver on the ability to practice in North Carolina without a license. So all of that is, I'm getting off sidetracked, and I'm sorry, Wallace. All the upshot to that is the rule that you had approved gave the option of licensure or obtaining NABP verify. So if the decision was to just say, you know what, we gave this a shot to try to expand RMOE to all contexts, and the parties can't seem to be satisfied with that, you could always withdraw the rule altogether. in which case the only folks who would be able to practice RMOE in North Carolina would be those doing it for health systems. There would be no provision to do that outside of that context.
It's okay if we don't all agree. I'm just going to say, as professionally as I can, that I'm biting my tongue off in my mouth here, and I'm going to continue to do so, and I am going to vote no. But that's okay if others vote yes.
So Jay, to I guess to layman's terms, if the folks that probably could benefit from this the most continue to nitpick it to death, we can just pull it out and say we're just going to leave it the way it is.
Yeah, and the board always has an option throughout the rulemaking process to decide, based on comments received, that it's pulling the rule back altogether. That, of course, has been the exact opposite of the committee and the board's approach, as y'all have worked awfully hard to put something in place that provides these additional practice organization options in a reasonable way. But yes, but that's I guess we could call that the nuclear option if you wanted to. But in the interim, if we republish, we'll continue to receive the comments and see if in light of additional information that's out there, folks can come to a different viewpoint on this. And if not, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
So there's not a public safety issue with delaying it, correct?
No, because the waivers are allowing the practice now.
Right.
And it would be from a public health and safety issue, Bill. Obviously, it would be better if we had a permanent rule in place.
Which is what we're doing.
Right, exactly.
It's
exactly.
not like it changes what we're doing now or allowing to be done now.
Correct.
Republishing doesn't disallow practices that are going on now.
That's correct.
But Bill, at some point, the people who are nitpicking this to death are going to have to decide if they want a rule that they don't like perfectly or no rule. I mean, if they were to send 10 objections to the RRC, COVID is going to be over before the General Assembly could undo that, and they will not be able to do RMOE at all. And so they're playing a dangerous game here where we frankly don't care. I mean, if they do RMOE or not. And so those folks are going to have to decide how much they don't like NABP Verify versus not doing it at all.
Well, in the interest of public safety, I would like for a rule to be in place where these pharmacists who are getting killed out there and trying to do too many things at one time have an option to, have some offsite help from, for things such as remote, order entry. But, if they're being, I guess, hindered by that, by there again, the nitpicking of the very own organizations that they work for, then that's not on us. That's on their superiors. So I am happy to leave that nuclear option sitting as the centerpiece of our table right now. That's all I got to say.
Okay, we've got a motion. We've got a second. We can vote it up. We can vote it down. The motion being to republish. So, Ashley, you seconded it. What's your vote as far as republishing?
She did say aye, Bill.
I'm sorry, Michelle.
Aye.
Andy?
No.
Keith?
Aye.
Wallace?
I'll say no.
All right, so where does that leave us?
All right, what is your vote, Bill, in favor of republishing? You muted yourself, Bill.
I am not in favor of republishing.
That leaves us then tied 3-3. So the motion would fail and we would move forward.
Then I guess we have a second question, and that is that, do we yank the rule today and then just decide later if we want some different version of the rule and tell the RRC never mind? Or do I roll over to the RRC virtually on Thursday and say, these objections are not well-founded, adopt this rule?
All right, so we need a motion.
I think in the, let's say, the background rule in the absence of contrary direction, I think is for me to roll over there and say, we've got this rule, they decided not to republish, what you gonna do? So unless anybody wants to do something different and make a motion to do something different, that's what I'm gonna do.
Well, I think that at least my intent was to go ahead and publish it.
Well,
Oh,
then
okay.
yay instead of
I'm
nay.
sorry, to enact it or whatever the process is. Don't kick it down the road.
Okay, then that's the default rule, I think, from what we've done before, is I'll go over on Thursday and say, we've decided not to republish it, rule on it as is.
Is that the understanding of the rest of the board members?
Yeah, that was my take from Clint's comments from the beginning. He felt that the objections were not well founded, and so I want to move this thing forward and get it done.
Nor did RRC council, but we'll see where we are. I will tell them that we would like to be on the agenda to have it heard. And, you know, if they somehow have a majority to find that it is not well founded, then we can decide to do something else or nothing later.
Okay. Is that
would
lay
conclude,
that to rest?
that would conclude that item of business.
Jay, you want me to roll in the next one?
Yes, roll on to LAIs.
Well, maybe we can do you want to do LAI separate from the other two?
Yeah, yes, we should do that separately from the other two.
All right. As you know, the General Assembly authorized pharmacists to administer certain long-acting injectables in certain situations pursuant to prescriptions. We had a temporary rule in place. The temporary rule this board just adopted. The permanent rule needs to be adopted by both this board and the med board by statute. So we had a joint committee meeting with the med board in December, and those folks had some questions, but were on board with the temporary rule becoming permanent. We subsequently made one minor change to the temporary rule for the proposed permanent rule. The temporary rule said that administration should be in accordance with the North Carolina statute on LAIs. The med board wanted to make sure that that it's in accordance with all state and all federal laws governing LAIs, and they were particularly concerned about REMS, which I'm not that familiar with, but I understand that there are some LAIs that, for example, you can only administer if you got an emergency room, you know, next door or whatever. And so they were concerned about highlighting the fact that you can only give an LAI in a circumstance where it is safe to do so. So we have added that all LAI administration should be done in accordance with all state and federal laws, including RIMS. And the Med Board is meeting, I think, later this week, maybe next week. And they are proposing to adopt a rule that affirms our rule. So, based on the committee recommendation, I think it is our recommendation that you propose as a permanent rule for notice and comment, the LAI rule with that tweak.
Okay, so you're looking for a motion from us to move forward with that?
Yes, for publish for notice and comment.
Somebody want to make a motion to that effect or have more discussion or ask questions? No motion.
I will just say we do need a motion about what to do with this because otherwise that rule is going to expire without action from us, which will create a larger problem to deal with.
I move that we move forward with publishing, I guess the board meeting should be to publish the existing rule for notice and comment as a permanent rule.
Trey, with a friendly amendment, was to publish the existing rule with the one slight change that Mr. Pinion described a few minutes ago.
I'll
Yeah,
second.
I agree. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I understand that.
Ashley, did you second it?
I will second it, yes.
Okay. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes. Ashley,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Keith,
Yes.
Wallace.
Yes.
Motion passes. Move it on.
Jay, you want to do me to do the next two together or separate?
Yeah, so the next two are going to be together. Clint's going to tell you about because they both relate to implementation of state law 2021-110.
Yep. 2021-110 tweaked pharmacist immunization, permitted technician immunization of certain things. And also required the board and the Med Board to adopt a code of ethics for at least immunizing pharmacists. The committee has approved, and the joint committee of our board and the Med Board have approved a proposal to publish a code of ethics that is in your packet that adopts the APA code of ethics as the code of ethics for pharmacists in all aspects of the practice of pharmacy, and defines a failure to comply as unprofessional conduct under the statute. And there are proposed amendments to 2507, which is the pharmacist vaccination rule, that set forth the requirements for pharmacy techs to administer vaccines. And there have been a few typographical tweaks to the 2507 amendment since that meeting. When I was going through, found some things that were not capitalized or didn't have commas or whatever, but no substantive changes. So the Med Board, based on the work of the Joint Committee, is also going to take up with the recommendation, the publication of 2507 amendments and the new 1820 Code of Ethics rules. So we'd need a motion or two motions to propose those for notice and comment.
Does it seem backwards to anybody else? Look, I'm all about promoting the role of technicians. I've talked about it for years, but it seems a little backwards to me to be giving them a code of ethics or agreeing to a code of ethics when we don't even have all the things done to that particular career path that we want done from an education perspective, from a coordination perspective of all their different roles and the things they can be involved in. We've got some that go to community college and get a associate's degree. Most don't. I don't know. That's just, might just be me, but it's hitting me a little bit kind of strange there.
Andy, that would be strange, and I misspoke if I said otherwise. It's a pharmacist code of ethics.
Oh,
right, Andy, right. State law, that new law requires there to be a code of ethics that govern immunizing pharmacists. So that's what Rule 1820 would do.
Sorry, I thought I heard text. My bad.
Two separate issues.
Loaded for bear for nothing, Andy.
Well, let's consider a motion separately then. Is there a motion to approve the proposed application of new rule .1820 on the Code of Ethics?
I'll make that motion to adopt the APHA Code of Ethics.
Is there a second? Michelle seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? Ashley?
Aye.
Michelle?
Sorry, the mute issue.
Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
The motion passes. Now we can consider the proposed publication of 2507 implementing permanently, as I understand it, vaccination authority for pharmacy technicians that is allowed now under the emergency rule. Is there a motion to move that forward?
I will make that motion, Bill, to move that forward.
And I'd second that.
Okay. Ashley, Wallace. Any other discussion? All in favor, please indicate. Ashley?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
That's unanimous. And I don't mean to rush us on any of this, guys. I'm just trying to keep things rolling.
The last ones we can certainly take all together. There are currently proposed amendments and adoptions for changing from an in-person permit requirement to a module and some related and cleanup stuff for the out-of-state pharmacy rule, the pharmacy intern registration rule, and the Rmoe in-house rule. The end of the notice and comment period is February the 8th. Jay, have we received any comments on anything?
Thus far, only one comment received on any of the three. It was a clarification comment on proposed new rule 2515, and one that will certainly be brought forward to the board after the public hearing at the appropriate time to review all of those. But board staff continue to monitor the inbox for comments on that on a daily basis.
And the public hearing on that, just to get things done in a timely fashion to make sure we can get intern registration before the fall. The public hearing will not be at a scheduled board meeting. You can hop on and listen, or Jay can give you a scintillating report at the March meeting about that. Your choice. And that's all I got to say about that.
Okay. You don't need any action from us on those 3 updates, right?
That
sir.
would be
Those-
inappropriate.
Yeah, they are all moving along, for the decisions in November. So that would be it on the rulemaking docket. Appreciate y'all working through that. That's obviously a much more substantial rulemaking docket than we typically have on a monthly meeting. Legislative update is there is no legislative update, which I'm pleased to report. So, well, the General Assembly will, of course, be moving into its short session later on in 2022, and we'll pick it up as that moves forward. That moves us then to committee update or committee progress reports. 3 of these I'll deal with very, very quickly. It's from the Telepharmacy Committee, obviously has spent a great deal of time and effort working on the Rmoe rules, as we've already discussed. The committee members are also beginning their look at direct-to-consumer dispensing technology, and to that end, visited Parata Systems in December to learn about that. I think the committee's sort of ability to keep moving in that direction is going to depend on what happens with the Rmoe rule, and whether we have to come back and either withdraw or start over on that. So that's where the Telepharmacy Committee is. The next 2, permit meeting, pharmacist manager education, and intern registration. Nothing to add, as you all know, the rulemakings are in progress. As just described, and depending on what the comments are, both of those committees may have some work to do to sift through those and provide some recommendations to the full board. So we'll keep you notified of that as it moves forward. And finally, the Working Conditions Committee, which did select a chair, our very own Ashley Duggins. And so, Ashley, I will stop my scintillating report, to use Clint's adjective, and leave it to you.
Thank you, Jay. So we've been working hard on this committee. What I think I want to convey today is that we are listening to pharmacists and we are trying to take action in that. Our last meeting, we did discover that Penny Shelton with NCAP has a wonderful survey that she was going to review at the Leadership Forum, which got canceled, or their form of the Leadership Forum, which got canceled due to COVID. And so instead of us reinventing the wheel, we are working with Penny. Andy and Penny are going to be meeting this week, Andy, I think, actually, to discuss that. We have figured out that there are a few additions that we need to make to that survey. And so Andy and Penny will be working through that, but that survey will be sent out in hopes in the next 4 to 6 weeks to pharmacists through the board, so that we can get some feedback and we can get some actionable steps where we want to work. Also, I think on Jay's end, the board is going to be working on almost like a safety form. We're working through that as well, to have out there so that pharmacists can make safety reports to the Board of Pharmacy. Again, that's in its infancy stages, but we are working diligently, we're working hard, but we want to be smart about what we're doing and make sure that from results that we get, we can make some actionable items. Happy to have anybody else add to that if I've left something out or I misspoke.
Ashley, it's Jay. Just real quickly with respect to the form you're talking about, this was a good suggestion that came out of Ashley and Keith's attendance and Ellen's attendance at NABP's task force on pharmacist working conditions back in November. And as you all know, we have an online means of pharmacists or the public or anybody else to file a complaint about anything. But the suggestion came out that it might be helpful to have a form that pharmacists could use specifically with respect to reports to the board about what they believe are unsafe working conditions. And so board staff is working on that. And I imagine she's not on the camera, but Aaliyah Cruz, our superb student here, this month will probably help us with that. So yes, we are working away on that. Ellen, anything else on that one?
I don't believe so. I think you and Ashley covered it.
I don't know if you said it, Ashley, but just for the good of the folks that are listening, just maybe expound on the group with the NABP task force, who all was there, give them a little bit of perspective on what that's about.
So Andy, the task force was made up of multiple people from across the nation. Keith, Ellen, and I both were represented North Carolina very well at that meeting, but that was just a meeting where, you know, and it's a national issue of workplace safety. So everyone got together over 2 days to really talk about what they're doing in their own states, and kind of work towards a resolution of these safety concerns that we're having. COVID has certainly made things a little bit more complicated. And so we're just, you know, we're trying to be more constructive about what we're doing and how we go about that. I don't know, Keith, do you have anything else to add to that? It was a very productive meeting, so.
Yeah, I agree. It was extremely productive, and you know, this is not a North Carolina issue. Like Ashley said, it's a nationwide issue. But you know, I think one of the things that we took away from it, you know, we do want to make sure that, you know, pharmacists that are out there that are experiencing these unsafe, you know, they're literally working in an unsafe working conditions. They have that we hear you. And as a board, you know, there are things we can do and things that are not within our purview, but whatever we can do, you know, we're going to do, but we got to know about it.
And I think the purpose of our survey is to really get to some of that. You know, we need to, there's things, like Keith said, there's things that we can and we can't do. So we want to be, we want to get to the bottom of what we can help and resolve and work on. And that's what this survey is specifically for. And we hope that those listening will participate in the survey, because it's very crucial for us to move forward to get folks' participation in the survey.
And I think, you know, speaking for the whole, you know, I'm not necessarily speaking for the whole committee, but I think our overall goal is to, you know, help pharmacists to have the safest working environment that they can be in. You know, we can't, you know, like I said, there's things we can't, you know, that are within our purview and things that aren't. But, you know, we want to protect the public by helping our pharmacists do their jobs as safely as they can.
May I ask, just for clarification, you're talking about safety due to excessive workload, not physical security from break-ins and that kind of thing, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
Yeah.
There's questions on there about, you know, vaccination, things, how that's kind of changed. It's a pretty lengthy survey, but it's the work that Penny and her team have done is definitely, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to work together with NCAP so that we can make this available for others to voice their concerns about what's going on in their workplace.
And we want to utilize this as a constructive tool. I mean, you know, we all get frustrated and sometimes need a place to vent, but you know, this is a good opportunity for pharmacists to be heard. But we want, you know, we need constructive input.
But fundamentally, it's an NCAP survey, right? Not a board survey.
I think at the end of the day, Bill, it's going to be a joint product. And I think we're relying on relying on the work that NCAP's already done to develop a tool to add to that, and then to use our resources to get that out and get the responses and collate all of those.
Will that survey be sent to a small group of people for testing purposes?
It's going to be sent to everyone. All pharmacists will be available to fill that out. And I think on Penny's side, a lot of that was in the community setting, but what Andy and Penny are working on together is to make that survey available to all aspects of pharmacy, not just community pharmacy, but to hospital pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, whatever be the case. Was we want to expand that survey a little bit so there's everyone can give their feedback.
Well, I guess my question was more to making sure the questions were not unambiguous, or were not ambiguous or misleading, or I've gotten a lot of surveys where the questions made certain assumptions that for the practice setting I was in, it was a totally invalid survey. That's the kind of testing I was talking about.
I think there's been a lot of great thought put into the survey that Penny presented to us, and Andy has some great ideas to build on that. It's not going to be ambiguous. It's going to be pretty detailed and give opportunities for folks to share.
Well, that's good.
One of the things I like about the survey is there is an open-ended section that allows for some, for folks to voice their opinion, just written comment section. And so I think that will help us to kind of narrow it down into some of the bigger issues that we need to be focusing our time on. But time is of the essence, and we want to make sure we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So that's the reason why we're working with Penny to get this out as soon as possible.
Right.
Ashley, thank you very much. You are far more scintillating than I when it comes to presenting a report.
Thank you.
That's a total compliment. There's nothing else on committee stuff. A couple of NABP items to discuss. Exactly two things. One is, as you know, the NABP annual meeting occurs in May of each year. Unfortunately, we've had to be virtual the past 2 years, but the hope and anticipation is that this year's annual meeting will be in person, and it will be in Phoenix, Arizona. So Keith, you can scout out all the good places in Phoenix for us to check out while we're there. The meeting is scheduled for May 19th through the 21st. And at the NABP annual meeting, whether live or in person or virtual, there are business sessions, of course, and each board of pharmacy needs to designate who its voting delegate and an alternate will be. We don't absolutely have to do it now, but it seemed to me if we could, it'd be a good thing to get on in. So wanted to put that out there, who believes there, and we can change it if need be down the road. But if you're planning to be at the NABP annual meeting, and I'd certainly hope that all of you can be, decide who our voting delegate and alternate will be, and I will send that out. And also, by the way, NABP offers a travel grant of up to $1,500 for each board of pharmacy to send at least one member to the annual meeting. And historically, we have made that available to our voting delegate. So if y'all want to talk and tell me who wants to be the voting delegate, who's planning to be there, we'll get that sorted out. I will say if it spurs discussion, typically I get listed as the alternate just because I'm always there and can step in if need be, but the voting delegate absolutely should be a board member.
As it stands, I'm planning on going, so I'm happy to do whatever you need me to do. Sorry, Michelle.
No, I was just going to ask if traditionally, is there a position that is in that that goes as, okay, that was all I was going to ask.
No, and Michelle, I should also, because I rather obtusely forget that you haven't been to one of these meetings. One thing I should point out is that voting delegate is who we're designated to do the physical act of casting a ballot. But the way this board has always approached NABP business sessions is the members very much get together and discuss what the proposals are and reach a consensus about how to vote. So this is more about the physical act of checking the box, not to the exclusion of the input from all the board members. So I heard Ashley volunteer as tribute. Anybody else? Or y'all, and we don't need a motion on this. Okay, the consensus of the board that I'll submit Ashley as the voting delegate. I'll put myself as the alternate, knowing that Ashley will be there for all the voting, so I won't have to do that. And Ashley, I'll also work with you to get the travel grant application submitted for you as well, if that sounds good to everybody.
It's good with me.
All right.
Well,
Well,
Ashley. I said, hot dog, Ashley.
I was hoping I wasn't alone, but maybe I am.
well, you and I'll take care of business, Ashley. Don't worry about that.
Jay. We got it. We got it.
So the second thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that NABP, of course, as you know, does a lot of different committee work for different things, but one of its very central committees is the Advisory Committee on Examinations. And as you see in that short memo, the ACE convenes 2 to 3 times a year to work with the NABP Executive Committee and NABP staff on overseeing the development of all of NABP's competency assessment programs. It's an incredibly important and central committee. NABP is seeking folks who are interested in serving, and it is a 3-year term, does require travel those 2 to 3 times a year. And some conference calls potentially in the interim. But NABP is seeking folks who are interested in applying. You'll see that President Caroline Jurin, you all know Caroline, of course, she's our colleague to the north in Virginia. And each of you as members are eligible to serve, as are the administrative officer of an active member board of pharmacy. And so if anyone's interested, we need to send in a statement of interest and a current resume to Al by next Monday. And so I just wanted to make sure it was out there. And of course, we're not limited. This is not where you have to select one board member, or as many board members who are interested may submit their interest. But I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to see that and know that it's an opportunity.
Jay, I'm thinking here, being in academia is something that I could certainly help, but I also am thinking that maybe as an instructor over a course like law, that it could get me too ingrained in, I mean, what are your thoughts on conflicts there, conflict of interest potentially?
I don't think there's, no, I wouldn't worry about conflicts of interest, Andy. I mean, the ACE, now what I will say is that there is also a separate committee that advises NABP that is composed principally of folks from academia. And I could get you more information about that one if that's something. So there is that, but there's not a conflict of interest. What Caroline will be doing, as any NABP president does, is assessing all those who have sent an interest and trying to get an appropriate mix of backgrounds and experience on that. But there's not a conflict of interest per se.
Okay. Follow up with me, if you will, about the committee that you mentioned, please.
Yep, I will. I will tell you guys, so we'll just look, let's do this. As long as I have from any member who's interested, as long as I have your current CV and your statement of interest by close of business Friday, I can put that together and send it in. So just send them to me and we'll get them in. Yeah, folks. And I will say I have some interest in this as well, but if members are interested, I will not submit because I think it'd be more important for you all to have the experience if you want it. So just let me know. And with that, then, that would get us to the consent agenda. By way of preview, after the consent agenda, the last thing we have on our docket today is we will need to go into a closed session, but it will only be for discussion of a personnel matter. That's just an update, nothing terrible. But a closed session for a personnel matter, we don't have any summary suspensions on the docket for today. So what I would recommend is if you approve the consent agenda, that we would go ahead and move immediately into closed session, and all the members of the public obviously cannot participate in that, but we would come back in after the closed session for the sole purpose of adjourning the meeting. There would not be any further discussed. And last thing I promise on this is on the consent agenda, what you have are 6 proposed consent orders. They were a little bit late breaking, but that was because it was a matter of some practical urgency. And Wallace, I do want to say on the record how much I appreciate your taking the time to have a sort of off-schedule pre-hearing conference on that. Keith, I remember when we first started talking about going to every other month for meetings, and we would move to PHCs would be every other month. You raised exactly the right question, was we got to make sure that if we have a matter, that it's somewhat urgent, that we have mechanisms in place to deal with that. And that's exactly what Wallace did, was he stepped up on that to deal with a somewhat urgent matter.
Can I ask on this consent order? It says consent order of discipline. So the 6 permits are being disciplined or just warned, or?
No, they are being disciplined. So the consent order would be that those 6 permits, which the specific order is that they are declared void as a matter of law as of the date that there was a change of ownership transaction, which voided their prior permits. However, as you've seen in the proposed consent order, because the parties there, as soon as they realized they had an issue, they stepped up and dealt with that and were very transparent and quick. The result would be that there's just the declaration with respect to those 6 permits, and the applications for the change of ownership permits would be granted with conditions. And essentially the only condition is an admonishment that any future change of ownership transaction, they need to do what they're supposed to do.
And the pharmacist manager is not being disciplined?
No, there's no proposed action against the pharmacist manager, because as the facts developed, it was clear that the pharmacist manager did not know and had no means of knowing that had occurred. And the instant that she found out about it, she immediately contacted the board herself and worked through it. And they immediately stopped providing services while they could get this cleared up. And so she did everything as a pharmacist that a pharmacist manager could be reasonably expected to do under the circumstances. The failure was at the permit level, not at the pharmacist manager level.
Thank you for that explanation. I think that's
sure
fine.
Thing. Yep. So I guess what we need is a motion to approve the consent agenda, if that's the will of the board.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Andy, Michelle, seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye or nay? If you're not, Ashley?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Andy?
Ahoy.
Keith?
Aye.
Wallace?
Wallace is recused.
heard,
He's
so,
recused because he's the the
Okay.
with the hearing officer.
Motion still passes by.
Indeed. Very good. So the next thing we would need, Mr. President, is a motion to move into closed session to discuss a personnel matter.
May I get a motion to move into closed session?
Motion to move into closed session.
Second.
Andy and Michelle? So moved.
Can we just have a 3-minute bio break?
I would, Michelle, you're a mind reader as usual. I was going to suggest that if this motion passes, can we take 5 to 10 minutes, at which we need a few minutes for Antoine to clear the board, and then